I don't know if anybody has seen any Mad Seasons videos before. I've seen a couple of them through reacts and stuff, and I genuinely enjoy his videos. Um, I am not yet subscribed on this account, so I'm already gonna, because I know it's gonna be good. It's Mad Seasons, bro. Like, it's gonna be good. It's good. Let's do it.
From the depths of Hades, an evil arises to corrupt the living. It brings pain and death to all that it touches. It murdered your family and destroyed your village. Now you must enter into its lair on a dark mission of vengeance. Good luck.
Oh, that music already.
The year is 1996, and as personal computers had started to become more and more common in households, it would mark the rise of PC gaming. The 16-bit console wars were becoming a thing of the past, now living in the shadow of the new generation as the newcomer PlayStation entered the battlefield. Doom had inspired a horde of similar first-person shooters, while real-time strategy games such as Blizzard's Warcraft or Westwood's Command & Conquer allowed players to command armies with the click of a button. And over on the console side, the previously covered Resident Evil coined an entire genre, combining this with many series
Resident
making
Evil
their
so much.
transition
That
from the
scene
world of
as
2D
well.
to 3D. It was certainly an exciting time for the industry as new genres and subgenres were being created and adopted. One of these genres would be named the Action RPG, or ARPG for short,
What is the master
which many claim today was created by none other than Diablo by Blizzard Entertainment.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
So
Dark
good, though.
Fantasy's descent into randomized dungeons filled with endless loot captivated millions in the trance of just one more run. So, stay a while and listen to why Diablo
That scene terrified me when I was watching it with my brother in Resident Evil. Yeah, same as that, bro. It was so good. That was, as a child, bro.
released in 1996, was great. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, AG1. Being a fan of
AG1?
MMOs, naturally, my life is a wreck.
Doritos.
And so is my routine and diet. To balance out a lifetime diet of red meat and high fructose corn syrup, I supplement myself with AG1, which is a 1-scoop daily health drink that's clinically shown to support gut health and help fill in common nutrient gaps. It has over 75
You gotta get them
ingredients,
greens, bro.
such as superfoods, B vitamins, probiotic strains, antioxidants, and
Oh, yeah.
functional mushrooms. So it basically replaces juggling a multivitamin, probiotics, and a bunch of other stuff. I just mix it with water first thing after rolling out of my box springless mattress, and it fits
Oh,
right
yeah.
into my imperfect
Get your
life.
greens.
For me, it's helped provide some steady nutritional support. I feel like I have more consistent energy, so I can make more videos complaining about World of Warcraft. It's not magic,
Fair.
but it does bring some balance and foundational nutrition in a nice and convenient way. If you're curious and you want to try it, through my link you can get 3 free AG1 travel packs, as well as
awesome.
3 free AGZ travel packs, plus some free vitamin D3 and K2, as well as an AG1 welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription order. Head
Drink
on
your
over
water.
to
Get your greens, guys.
drinkag1.com/mad season show to grab that deal and kickstart your routine. Although Diablo is often credited as the true origins of the genre, truthfully, the foundation for which it was built off can be traced all the way back to 1980. While it was officially classified as an action RPG due to its real-time combat, from a design standpoint, it wasn't all too dissimilar from a roguelike. In a traditional RPG, the experience of 2 different players will be relatively the same. They encounter the same characters with the same stories. They go through the same dungeons that hold the same treasure chests with the same treasure inside of them. And at the end, they fight the same boss and they do the same thing.
Yeah, so like the formula was there. It's just the additions, the features, and the story was more developed for sure.
Over and over until they reach the same credit screen. The draw is to dive into this predetermined story and being taken across this world on the developers say, and see the characters grow and change in often a very rigid way, and respectfully touting hundreds of hours of gameplay. However, with an action RPG like Diablo, they would promise infinity, as its longevity lied in its replayability. While there certainly was a story to be had, one of the main draws is that, due to its randomized nature, the game could be played millions of times, and the gameplay experience could be totally different. Different people will choose different characters, allocate their stats differently, get different dungeon layouts, different enemies, with different affixes, and different loot, which leads to different builds, creating this unimaginable amount of variations in its gameplay. And while Diablo is known for birthing this genre of game that relies heavily on replayability, its true origins, the roguelike, unsurprisingly, was in 1980 with a game called Rogue. Yeah, it was the Dark Ages. It's essentially the electronic version of playing with your alphabet soup. I'm
Oh
sure
my
a lot
God,
of you
I've
probably
never
weren't even
seen that
born
game
when
before.
this came out. This, amusingly enough, were its graphics. You were the mighty @ symbol, trudging through dungeons, fighting deadly foes such as the dastardly letter K,
Oh my god, iconic. Iconic.
which represents a kestrel. Yeah, people had a lot of imagination in 1980, but what separated this from a traditional RPG was that its draw was replayability by way of a unique experience each and every run. Similar to Diablo, each run would have different layouts, enemies, loot,
Okay,
traps,
so you had
and it demanded
different
that the
maps.
player to adapt on the fly in order to succeed. There wasn't this one strategy fits all, which created a unique experience with each attempt, and it became quite popular.
Oh no, the S is chasing
Well,
him. Oh
as
my god.
popular as it could be in stuffy college and high school computer labs growing across the globe. And just like with any innovation after its release, many games like Rogue
You
would
missed the
follow in its
snake.
footsteps,
The snake
thus
misses.
creating the genre
You
roguelike.
defeat the snake.
They all had various tweaks in their world and story and gameplay, but at the end of the day, the goal was to reach the end while creating unique builds along the way and battling random enemies in this turn-based style of combat. If you were to fail, you would try again from the start, and if you were successful, you would try again from the start. The genre relied heavily on the slot machine effect.
Can I just say, bro, if this game came out now as an indie game, I guarantee you that game would sell out. Do you know why? Because people be like, oh, I want to try it. It looks stupid, bro. I want to try it. And they would. And they'd buy it. And they'd probably enjoy it because it's so stripped down to its basics that they're like, oh, it's so good.
Effect of this addiction where every turn or every kill has this potential to yield big rewards. Some game-altering bow or staff that amplifies character power many times over, to where suddenly rooms that took 10 minutes to clear now take 30 seconds. In this way, although it feels a little bit silly to say since there are no real graphics nor even sound effects, the game was far more action-oriented than its contemporaries at the time, which were far more story-oriented and slower-paced. One of these many clones would be Angband 10 years later in 1990, and Angband was important because one particularly important individual
This is
would
crazy.
become quite addicted to it. David Brevik. As simple as these games were, they were also quite well known for their intense difficulty, and David would become so obsessed with it that he would use it as an inspiration for the series that we know today, Diablo, named after the mountain that he grew up near in San Francisco, California. The idea was simple yet daunting. The game was to take the idea of Angband and bring it out of the Stone Age. Instead of an @ symbol,
Fair.
you were a rogue or warrior or sorcerer. Instead of various characters and symbols, you had actual graphics, grass, trees, buildings, caves, dungeons, and even voice acting.
The witch, Adria, is
So
an
good, bro.
anomaly here in Tristram.
Instead of reading through giant blocks of text in order to be immersed into the world,
Wait, did you actually have to read all that? You actually did. It's like an actual action log on the left. My head's kind of in it, but it just says Morgan Lord Darkness summons a fiend of darkness. This is brilliant.
That's ultimately comprised of punctuation. The game would now deliver it naturally through its gameplay and atmosphere. Instead of plain text telling you how much damage a spell dealt, you now saw your character explode an enemy, or get exploded in gory detail, and items, weapons, and armor now had graphics, and each swing had this hefty audio feedback, while the wind would howl and gust around you with music playing in the background to set the atmosphere. But
100%.
the question remained, how is it possible to go from this to this? To turn what was at that point words on paper into a game that
Hell
would
yeah.
define a genre?
Hell yeah.
We've gone around to 25 different publishers, and they have said, no. RPGs are dead.
The more material beginnings of the game would begin in 1993, when Brevik, along with two friends, Max and Eric Schaefer, founded the video game development company, Condor. Having a diverse history of experience under their belts, it was then that they would transition Diablo from an idea in their heads to words on paper, and began pitching it to various publishers in order to get the proper funding to make it into a reality. However, this proved to be difficult, as the RPG genre had hit something of a slump during this time. They had been selling quite poorly across all platforms, and even though today it's largely remembered for its action portion of the ARPG, simply by having those last three letters introduced a tremendous hurdle. And so, ironically enough, this game that would spawn a legendary franchise was denied by publisher after publisher, and the team began to realize that it wouldn't be businessmen who would provide the funding it needed. It would have to be people who truly understood what made games great.
Hell yeah, and that's how we started, bro. That's how we started. Gamers started making games, and it showed, bro. Oh, man.
Las Vegas is often thought of as the wedding capital of the country. Want to get married quickly? Come to Las Vegas. Well, this week, some of the most important couplings in the computer industry will take place here. Not at one of these little wedding chapels, but over at the convention center at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Things took a brighter turn at the 1994 Consumer Electronics Show, where Condor had been demoing a new fighting game, the Justice League Task Force for the Sega Genesis. At this point, Street Fighter II had hit arcades and store shelves, which marked a new...
That's it, bro. Just on arcade Street Fighter. That is my childhood, bro.
new era for the fighting game community. Of course, with its overwhelming success came many clones, including this Justice League knockoff. And surprisingly, another developer named Silicon and Synapse was demoing the Super Nintendo version. This came as a surprise to both teams, as the two never knew the other version existed. Yet still, somehow, the two versions ended up being remarkably similar in both visual design and its gameplay.
Just a tad
this would
similar.
create a spark, as the developers clearly had similar design philosophies in mind, and so Condor pitched Diablo to Silicon and Synapse and asked if they had any interest on working on it together and having their publisher, which was Davidson and Associates, to provide the funding. Silicon was intrigued, but they just had their hands full at the time, and they told Condor that they would talk again after they were finished with an interesting idea that they were working on called Warcraft. True to their word, and now going under the name Blizzard Entertainment to avoid confusion with breast implants, after Warcraft's release, they let Condor formally pitch Diablo to them, and even though the RPG genre had been stagnant, they saw the uniqueness and potential of Diablo, which ultimately resulted in them acquiring Condor and renaming them to Blizzard North, and tasked them with making Diablo a reality. Needless to say, this acquisition would be a critical moment for the game's development. However, not having experience with business and negotiating, they ended up settling on a $300,000 budget for Diablo, which was woefully inadequate to pay a development team of around 15 people at this point. However, fortunately, they had also been doing some work for 3DO on their upcoming console, the M2, at this point having had a proven background in sports games, most notably with a popular arcade basketball game, NBA Jam. They ended up signing a $1 million contract to make a similar arcade backyard football-based game called NFL PA Superstars. 3DO had ended up being so impressed with their work that when Blizzard approached Condor to acquire them, it would create a bidding war. 3DO would end up bidding nearly double what Blizzard was offering,
Oh.
but still, the team decided to go with the latter as they felt that they really understood their vision.
Good choice,
and
bro.
They would give them more freedom to make Diablo the best version that it could be. The format of the game is what really sold Blizzard. Instead of this Tolkien-esque inspired fantasy world with elves and dragons, players would be plunged into the gothic horror inspired world of Sanctuary, where the players take control of a hero in their attempts to save the town of Tristram from Diablo. The world's become a battlefield in a war between heaven
The art
and
is
hell,
solid, bro.
and it's infested with demonic entities, and it's up to you to delve into the dungeons and crypts and destroy the Lord of Terror himself. And while there certainly was story to be found, the focus of the game was centered much more on what made these roguelike games popular, and that's the loot. The previously mentioned dopamine slot machine effect of getting this uber drop and going on a monster slaying rampage. There wasn't a long
There it
and
is.
intricate story and campaign to work through, nor any deep, hyper-complex character customization that were standard to the RPG. Instead, owing to its subgenre, they had focused much more on action and gameplay, and much like the roguelike, replayability. And at its core, this would be what would set it apart from the then stagnant RPG genre. Specifically, character creation at this point in the RPG had hit this all-time level of complexity. Being inspired from tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, it often involved research of different
Complexity.
races, classes.
It seems that every single game ends up hitting a wall where the devs are creating something that's too complex and people just crave simplicity. It seems to just happen over and over again.
Subclasses, archetypes, stat point allocations, character backgrounds, and it commanded a lot of energy before players could even begin their journey. Once again, owing to its action side, one of Diablo's core philosophies was that, especially since it was so focused on replayability, was to be able to hit a few buttons and then let the player loose into the world so that they could get the feeling of slashing demons and getting loot as quickly
Exactly.
as possible.
Get in
Something
as
that
quickly
can
as
feel
possible.
quite jarring today, but certainly achieved its goal of this quick turnaround of being able to start runs without any hassle. Graphically, the game had been inspired by the legendary XCOM series, where the viewpoint was this isometric look over the game world. In fact, the world was designed initially from direct screen grabs of the individual tile structure of XCOM, where the world is essentially this grid that the player can move around in. Old School RuneScape is another game that has a similar system, although with a movable camera, of course. Something that didn't copy from XCOM, however, would be its vibrancy. The world of Sanctuary, understandably so, as it was infested with demons, was quite dark and unwelcoming. The goal was
Yep.
to make the player actually feel as if they were crawling through a dungeon or a crypt with danger lurking around every corner.
And I have to say, they nailed that. Everything from soundtrack to the way it looked, the darkness, everything. I know you can up it or whatever, but it was just nailed. They nailed it to a T, mate. Like, 1 in a billion.
And so the whole aesthetic of the game would be about as depressing as my voice, which would be complemented quite nicely with its sound design. The music
Hey,
would
8
range
Mad
from-
Seasons, bro. It works great. Your voice is great, bro. It's very soothing. It's chill. Loving it.
These low-pitch hums to this atmospheric howling to create the sense of despair and danger that the entire world would be centered around.
The big controversy. Real time versus turn-based.
But as action-oriented as it ended up being, it became quite close to becoming an entirely different game. Anyone who's ever played the original Final Fantasies knows that a staple of RPGs early on was its turn-based combat, whether that be characters and enemies having a speed stat that reduced time between attacks, or a predetermined order of turns, or turns being split up into sub-turns with
Are we gonna
certain
see
action
Blue
points to
Dragon?
use per turn, or any variation really. Generally, one thing was true.
Oh,
You
Blue
wait for your
Dragon.
turn to play. It's kind of like in an anime where characters attack and then talk, and then it's the other guy's turn to attack, and then they talk. People say it's
For like
kind of
an hour.
silly, but I guess they just never played old school RPGs. This was something that, again, was inspired from tabletop RPGs, as it was
I appreciate the fact that D1 was not made turn-based game. I like turn-based games at all. I agree, yeah. Like, it has its own charms for a specific game, but for Diablo 1, it just wouldn't work because you just wouldn't be able to get as immersed in the horror that Diablo 1 provided if it was turn-based, in my opinion, because the whole idea of you coming around the corners and then there is mobs there and they just keep crowding on you just gives you the anxiety that, like, just makes you enjoy the game just that bit more. So I definitely agree. It's brilliant.
Really the only way to do combat, and something that just stuck with the genre even when it reached mediums that very much allowed for real-time combat. And at this point in the game's development, it just seemed to be a given that it was to have turn-based combat, just like every other RPG. The player would walk up to an enemy, they would perform a few actions such as attack, heal, use an item, and then the enemy would get their turn and do their attacks until one of them fell over. This is...
He actually... He froze the image himself, and I was like, oh my god, is my stream falling out? Like, what's going on? He got me, bro. He got me.
How Rogue and its many clones worked, and even though technology evolved, it just didn't immediately occur to developers that they weren't rolling dice and writing in little pieces of paper anymore. The impetus for this change ended up being another series that Blizzard had seen success with, the previously mentioned Warcraft.
Welcome to the world of Warcraft.
Warcraft is an RTS, real-time strategy, a genre of game which very name is in defiance of this traditional turn-based structure that had similarly dominated strategy games at that point. Players would construct buildings, train troops, mine gold,
I still love my
slaughter
real-time
enemies all in
strategies,
real
bro.
time.
Just don't get to
with
play
the
them as much,
exclusion
but
of
they're
the pause
so good.
button, if they were to walk away from their computer, they would eventually be overrun. The strategy genre faced similar doubts before its breakthrough, but this fast-paced, on-demand action would quickly become its most defining trait. And since Blizzard had seen such success in their Warcraft series, they put the same pressure on Blizzard North to make Diablo the one to break the same barrier for the RPG genre. And seeing as how the game had already done away with the more traditional features of the genre, some members of the team began to think, why not also this turn-based combat? The game was already setting up to be very action-oriented, so wouldn't a real-time system be more appropriate? This would become a huge point of debate within the team, with Breivik himself adamantly insisting on turn-based, and that the very success of the game depended upon it.
Blizzard South, they approached us and said, well, we'd really like to make this a real-time game. And I said, what are you guys talking about? Real-time? Wait, no. This is one of your strategy games.
He argued that the core of the RPG, all the way back to D&D, was that you would have these situations where it's really dangerous and your character's on the verge of death, and each and every decision you make can be the difference between life and death. His point against real-time was that this core fundamental appeal of the RPG would be lost, and the game would become mindless as players would just spam attacks or chug potions in desperation. The development team, which was around 15 people large at this point, gathered for a vote, and for various reasons, certainly the success of Warcraft being one of them, real-time combat ended up being the favorite option, with only a few holdouts wanting.
I think real-time combat like that just allows you to strategize more, exactly building onto what he was saying, because you can get out of it, you can do your thing, you can strategize, you can plan, you can TP to town and figure out what you're doing, and then come back when you're ready. Like, I think that just builds on the horror and the strategy and being so immersed in the game that everything just feels like it matters for sure. I think the only one turn-based RPG in Dungeons or Tremor. It doesn't work half bad, but it drags out the game a lot.
Turn-based. The biggest opponent of real-time, David, ended up being the one to implement the system, and as soon as it was finished, he had this to say.
So I remember taking the mouse, and the warrior walked over and smacked the skeleton down, and I was like, oh my god! That was awesome!
This moment would become the birth of the action
Bro,
RPG.
like, how satisfying
Another feature
can that
that
be
Blizzard would
to
have
do
their
it in
way
real
with
time, bro,
was
like, you know?
multiplayer. At the time, they were working on a live service feature to support all of their games, a community hub of sorts where players could make accounts, add friends, and chat with and play with each other in a variety of Blizzard products, eventually forming the name Battle.net. And since Diablo was being developed at the same time, it became a highly important feature that the team hadn't even considered at this point. By the mid-90s, computers and dial-up connections had started to become standard in households.
I like this. With one click, I can browse all kinds of great features on America Online.
But even today, if you think about the traditional RPG, you rarely find that they have any kind of multiplayer. But of course, as we've learned, Diablo is far from traditional, and mid-development, the decision was made to make it into a multiplayer experience, which was just another unexplored frontier that they had set upon.
You don't have Jack.
Although it certainly added more hours and held its own hurdles. Dashing
These
skeletons and
cats, bro.
exploding demons is great, but what about teaming up with friends and creating unique builds that synergize in a multiplayer setting?
Replayability. One of the biggest factors, one of the biggest like features that's built into the Diablo games.
Again, as the game lacked this conventional long campaign of the RPG genre, the only way to obtain longevity was through replayability. This was done in a few different ways, some that were in the player's control, while others weren't. In their control, you had a choice of 3 classes, the basic bread and butter of any RPG. You had the warrior, rogue, and sorcerer.
6
The
sketches,
basic
bro.
gameplay being what you would expect. Warriors start off with higher stats appropriate for melee combat, as well as the highest armor class. Rogues were more dexterity oriented, specializing in
me.
bows and using lighter armor. And sorcerers were the weakest melee fighters, but the most capable in spellcasting. Each of these classes offered unique playstyles, but at the same time they weren't restricted like in a typical RPG where perhaps a sorcerer couldn't wield melee weapons. Although they did specialize in their conventional roles, it was also important for the developers to...
Something that definitely sucks about modern games is a lack of replayability. Yeah, it definitely lacks in some games, depending on the game itself, to be honest. But I have, like I've said it before, back when Diablo was a thing, they were not focusing on how many active players they have or, you know, how many people are buying the monthly subscription. Is how many copies of the game can we sell. That was their biggest selling point, is make the game attractive, make it playable, and sell as many copies. That was their return of money. But now, because all of that shifted towards keeping players active, well, now the whole mindset changed, even though the simplest thing they could do for even on subscription games or anything like that is to keep players playing, and that is replayability. But they've lost their minds on things like that, and they just basically try to get as much money out of players, unfortunately, compared to just letting them play the game naturally, right? And spend their own time in it naturally.
give the player the power to be a warrior who could cast spells, or a sorcerer who is also capable in melee when it was needed. This is often referred to as multi-classing, and it ended up being an effective way in giving players a lot of power to create unique hybrid builds, which in turn gave the game a lot of replay value. It also relied heavily on another core of the roguelike, and that's the fact that the levels are randomly generated in every sense. The layout is random, the entrances and exits are random, room size, enemies within the room, you had shrines and interactables, chests and destructibles in their
played it
positions,
in the original form, no.
enemy types, the affixes they
Only a little
have,
bit.
the number of items they drop, the quality of items they drop. The goal was for the player to play a lifetime, yet still never experience the exact same run twice, and to remove the ability to have online guides that say, go to this area in this floor and kill this enemy to get this
Yep.
item. And just like any roguelike in this sense, it required adaptability. But at this point, as promising as this all seemed, there were some serious doubts. A long, detailed campaign, an intricate and in-depth character creation system, turn-based combat. Diablo had defied nearly every established staple of the RPG, putting it into an uncertain future. It had two possibilities. It could be a revolutionary hit, or it would quickly fade away into obscurity. However, as it neared its final stages, the team had begun to realize just what they had accomplished, as routine bug fixes would become out of hand and turn into actual full runs, as the developers themselves had difficulty turning away from their own game, often returning home late at night and telling their spouses, "Oh, sorry, honey. Yeah, long day at the office. It was brutal." In their minds, although I'm sure there were doubts, they'd created one of the most unique and addictive games of all time. The waters were tested briefly in a deal with PC Gamer magazine, which in their November 1996 issue, they offered a free demo of Diablo and their new DirectX API software, which served as a good form of last-minute feedback for bug fixes and some changes.
How do you get people to play your game, bro? How do you get people to play a game? In those days, obviously, internet wasn't as huge, and, you know, YouTube wasn't as huge, and streamers weren't a thing, or whatever. It's like, nah, just let the people play your game, bro. Every single game should have a demo, or should have a taste, or give somebody a free weekend, because how else are you going to get them to play? Nobody's going to trust you on just what you show them. Just, like, let them play the game for a minute. Like, bro, the best selling point, just let them play the game for a minute. What are you going to lose on it?
Adding the overlay map, as well as implementing a hotbar for item use, and also the ability to cast spells without having to open a menu. Pretty huge changes, all things considered, and it all came just 1 month out from release, as the team worked around the clock scrambling to release by Christmas.
It wasn't YouTube at all at that time. Release.
Unfortunately,
Windows 95. Diablo Blizzard. Windows 95. Oh, damn. As we go to press, this is the #1 selling software for the PC with over 500,000 units sold. Phew. Man.
Didn't make the Christmas deadline, as the game released just at the end of the year on December 31st. But as it would turn out, it didn't matter, as Diablo quickly smashed their initial prediction of 100,000 copies sold, as it soared to 500,000 by April, and then 1 million by November,
insane.
making it the fastest-selling PC game at that point. And to this day, it remains to be one of the best-selling computer games of all time. It received accolade after accolade from every publication, as the gaming world quickly became lost in its addictive gameplay loop, item drops, and unique builds that the game had perfected. As described, the players were immediately thrown into the kingdom of Kendurus, specifically in the town of Tristram, where the townsfolk offer gossip and information of what's happening. There's been some strange occurrences at the town cathedral, where demons have begun pouring out of. The elder of the town, a man named Deckard Cain, serves as the player's advisor, guiding them along the campaign and, importantly, offering his identifying services.
The good
As
old
is standard
Deckard Cain.
with games like Rogue, to learn the attributes and boons of a piece of equipment, you'd either need to identify it yourself via a consumable scroll that drops, or by enlisting the aid of an NPC for a small fee. Delving into the cathedral, the player experiences the meat of the game as they explore the previously mentioned randomly generated levels, fight randomized enemies with randomized affixes for randomized loot. Not counting side areas, there were 16 floors total, with 4 different levels split up into 4 parts. The cathedral, the catacombs, the caves, and finally, hell itself. Being the early years of the genre, there were just 7 pieces of equipment total. You had a weapon and an offhand, as well as body armor, a helmet, 2 rings, and an amulet. And they would hold various stat boosts like plus strength that increased melee damage, or dexterity, which was chance to hit armor and range damage, or magic, which increased your total mana pool, as well as allowing the player to learn higher level spells. And there are also more secondary stats, such as elemental resistances and armor class. Many items had stat requirements in order to equip them, and this is where the previously described multi-classing was alive and well. For example, when you think of a conventional sorcerer, you usually think of this lightly armored, robed wizard. However, if a player wanted to, in order to obtain a higher armor class and avoid physical attacks more effectively, they could put points into strength in order to equip this more heavily plated equipment.
The fact that they're just like giving the player the freedom to play the game however they want is just so rewarding for everyone who plays it. Like they're treating the player the way they should be treated. You know what I mean? You're not spoon feeding them everything. Just like this is how you have to play our game. This is what you got to do. These are all the spells you got to use. It's like, nah, mate, you have all of the freedom. You can do whatever you want, whether you hit a wall or not. You can do absolutely whatever you want and try whatever you want. And having that freedom is just that's what's going to bring people to play your game, is the fact that you can play the game however you want to play the game.
And
Masterpiece,
in fact,
bro.
it was pretty beneficial to do so in Diablo 1. There were
Masterpiece.
3 different rarity of items in order of least to most powerful. You had the normal whites, the magic blues, and unique yellows, the latter either being rewarded for completing quests or rarely dropping off of enemies. And in addition to powerful stats, they could also have these special unique affixes that altered gameplay in a major way, such as the Wind Force bow, which knocked enemies back on hit, or maybe Leoric's crown, which had lifesteal. And even today, the game remains to be quite effective in evoking excitement out of the player if they luck out and they receive this super powerful drop that completes their build. Whoa, resist all 50, 60% armor,
That's broken,
minus 30
bro.
mana,
Like,
but plus 15 to
look
strength
at
and
that.
vitality.
Anyone who knows and who's played D1, when they see the resistances alone, it's just like, bro, we're there, this is it.
Getting more into
This
the
is
story,
it.
the downfall of the town
50%.
traces back to King Leoric, who was once this noble ruler
It mattered.
who claimed the throne after driving out the tyrannical Zakharum, which was once a religion that worshipped the light, but was now corrupted and twisted to the forces of evil. Leoric made Tristram his capital, and he restored the cathedral that was built centuries earlier by the Horadrim, who were a group of wizards who forged items called soul stones, which imprisoned the prime evils of hell. As it turned out, beneath the cathedral was the soul stone containing Diablo, who was the Lord of Terror, and one day, one of Leoric's trusted advisors, the Archbishop Lazarus, uncovered the artifact during a forbidden excavation, and it wasn't long until whispers from the stone would seep into Lazarus' soul, making him a pawn of Diablo, with Leoric himself following soon after. The history of the town and the lore of the entire game would kind of be drip-fed to players through the form of these lore-related tomes placed randomly in the levels. It's revealed
That
that
worked
these
so well
prime
for the game.
evils are the masters of hell. There's Mephisto, who's the lord of hatred, Baal, the lord of destruction,
Why he look good here? Bro, why he actually look good? I'm so mad. He actually looks sick, bro. He looks disgusting. He looks horror. He looks everything. He looks mad. What, why can't he look like that? Oh my god. He looks, this fellow, I would have loved to see reanimated, bro.
and of course Diablo, the Lord of Terror.
Diablo. Can't forget
Slowly, the player would uncover this dark reality of what was going on level by level, all the while battling Diablo's minions and lieutenants. One of the most memorable being the Butcher, who, interestingly enough, had a unique cutscene to introduce him, which was removed as it was a little too intense for audiences at the time.
Wait. I don't know if I'm going to get spoilers, but I kind of want to get spoilers right now because he said it was removed. So I don't know if it's going to be in the game. So I'm going to watch it, so I'm willing to get my spoilers if anybody doesn't have any. But it was removed because it was too much? Alright, I'm ready.
It turned out that Lazarus had lured people, including children, into the church with
Okay, I'm not sure if that
promises
was
of
it, but that was
games
still
and toys,
disgusting anyway.
where they were subsequently slaughtered by the demon. So between the graphics and sound effects and
Love that.
music and lore, the whole tone of the game immediately stood out, and many even today reminisce of its uncanny ability to fully immerse the player and make them feel as if they were trudging through this actual dungeon. By this point, the player has certainly encountered some sort of quest, which were another randomly generated feature. There were 16 in total, with many of them, but not all, being randomly chosen, such as slaying the now undead Skeleton King Leoric, or perhaps retrieving a special anvil for the town blacksmith to craft a
I
unique
got that
weapon.
anvil.
So combining this with the other many randomized elements of the game is quite effective in promoting additional playthroughs and once again banking on this replayability for its longevity. Eventually the player finds themselves in the catacombs on levels 5 through 8 as they delve deeper and gain new levels and equipment.
Yeah, one of my D&D players quit when he got my reenactment of the butcher.
The enemies, of course, get tougher to match them, whether that be raw strength and life, or having unique skill sets and mechanics that the player now has to dodge to handle. It's in these levels that we learn more of the tragedy of King Leoric. His younger son, Prince Albrecht, had gone missing, and stricken by grief, he became vulnerable to Diablo's influence. He began to go mad and executed innocent civilians, accusing them of treason, until his loyal knight, Lackdanon, slew him in self-defense. Wait, this sounds familiar. Leoric's dying curse animated his bones and those of his knights as skeletal warriors.
It's cool,
And players would have a chance to encounter him through a quest where, if they defeat him, they're rewarded with his life-stealing crown. Next area were the caves, which were levels 9 through 12, which plunged you into this volcanic chasm rife with lava as the setting of the game slowly became more and more demonic. And then lastly, the player ventures into hell itself on levels 13 through 16, into the heart of Diablo's forces. The enemies here are at their most powerful, of course, and they require a respectable amount of experience and know-how in order to defeat them. Good start. Owing to its pretty hardcore roots in Rogue, the game wasn't a cakewalk by any means, especially in the culture of the mid-90s where guides existed, but were much more sparse and less refined. And even then, that doesn't take into account the random nature of the game, which also hindered.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I've ever, I don't necessarily want to, look at guides or anything. I generally want to figure out the game myself, but playing Diablo 1, I never felt like I want to look at a guide because this is frustrating me or anything like that. Like, I feel like it was so well self-explanatory, well, at least put together self-explanatory, and you could, even if you got possibly heart stuck or whatever, you could always just attempt something and work your way out. Well, eventually you might end up getting heart stuck, but you won't know till you do it, right?
These step-by-step instructions to go here, get this item, as of course everybody's playthrough would be completely different. One huge difference, though, that made it far more beginner-friendly was the fact that it didn't have permanent character death, which of course is a staple of the rogue genre. The player could freely save, and if they were to die, you could just simply reload it and pick up where you left off. Unless you accidentally save as you're dying, then you're screwed. Guess how I found that out. Oh, I saved!
Oh,
no.
that's probably the worst thing then.
I can't do anything. That's it. That's game over. But it's in these hell levels where you learn the grim truth.
That's probably the only
Lazarus
thing
who lured the king.
how you would end up screwing yourself is if you saved too close to you dying. GG, bro. Rest in peace.
Son Albrecht away, and by plunging Diablo's soulstone into his forehead, reincarnated him as the Lord of Terror. You actually encounter Lazarus here, and if you manage to slay him, you open the gate to the final level where you face off against Diablo, who attacks with...
Not into guides, more into how stuff works and why and what items to use and why. That's fair. At the same time, I feel like the game should probably give you a little bit of that and explain some of it naturally instead of you going into outer sources. But it's understandable for older games, they didn't come with all that technology or whatever. But I think with newer games, there should be a way for you to figure that out naturally, organically within the game. I think that's the best way to stay immersed and actually care about your progress.
The flurry of flame magic and melee swings. It's quite the battle, and where 16 levels worth of stat leveling and gear choices are put to the test. But if you're successful, the Lord of Terror was slain. However, salvation soon turns to sacrifice. Without a host, Diablo's essence begins to writhe free, and it must find a new host lest its power and devastation be unleashed upon the world. And so the player dislodges the soul stone from its skull, revealing the body of the fallen prince, where he briefly orgasms, and then the player plunges.
Man,
it straight into their
You really
skull,
went there.
hoping that they can contain the demon within and bringing peace to the people of Sanctuary. A final narration is played, describing that the essence of Diablo is contained for now. The town of Tristram is saved, yet forever scarred, as you gaze eastwards to a land called Aranak in a desperate search for answers on how to end the chain of torment for good. And so ends the story of a game that crafted a genre. It was hailed as a masterpiece shortly after its release, and the team wanted to immediately begin work on its sequel, Diablo 2. But its massive success actually ended up being a curse, as it caused pressure to instead focus on an expansion for Diablo 1. David, in particular, was very resistant to this idea, and they ended up reaching a compromise. The expansion would be developed by Synergistic Software, which was a division of Sierra Online, which was another developer under Davidson and Associates. But while they would develop the game, they would also be under the direction of Blizzard North to ensure that it was true to the base game and it followed the lore correctly. The expansion included new levels, items, monsters, a new class called the Monk, as well as some quality of life improvements such as a run mode, which increased movement speed in the town. However, unfortunately, the whole project ended up being quite controversial and frustrating, with Brevik citing frequent communication issues and Sierra failing to follow what North wanted of them. They would include quite silly quests and dialogue that contradicted the dark and serious tone of the base game.
If only I had something normal to wear, it wouldn't be so bad.
Uh-oh.
Hey,
The cows.
could you go back to my place and get my suit for me?
They'd also made two more classes, the Bard and the Barbarian,
No.
that would
Why would you
contradict the
do
lore
that?
of the in-development Diablo 2. And they were ordered to remove all of this from the game, which they did, but they still kept them accessible via a special command, which ended up putting a sour taste in Blizzard North's mouth, as they felt like they had sneaked it in under their noses. There were other issues, such as levels that had fixed layouts and weren't randomly generated, which kind of contradicted the entire idea of having a unique run every time. The aesthetic moved away from its signature gothic horror and more towards an H.P. Lovecraft-inspired version, among other issues, and today it's quite controversial among its player base, with some loving it and others disliking it, as it
Okay, I'm
didn't
kind of
feel close
glad I
enough to
didn't get
base game for
the Hellfire expansion. I've only played Diablo 1. I'm actually glad. I really am.
them. Even today, David remains very unhappy with the expansion and how things went down behind the scenes.
What is the story with the Hellfire expansion?
Oh my God, really? You're gonna bring that up?
The poor man.
I'll tell it quickly, but
He's
basically it
traumatized.
was not made by us. We had a design doc. They didn't follow it. They made a teddy bear quest. I was fucking pissed, and it just didn't work out. We couldn't communicate well with them. I was really upset about the entire thing. And in the end, I just kind of
Based.
disavowed it. Now, whether or not that's the right thing to do or not, I don't know. But you know, I'm still a little upset about the entire way that it went down.
Absolutely based. And this is how we should treat devs that do not follow the path of the game. If you start making stuff up that doesn't align with it, just bro, you know, express yourself. You know what I mean? Like, just, you're ruining the game. Didn't even know it existed. Lol. Well, that's a good thing, right?
But what is objectively true is that Diablo today is one of the most legendary franchises of all time, and it played a very large role in making Blizzard so respected and revered at the time. So from a dusty computer lab, to an idea in a head, to words on paper, to a record-breaking PC game, it birthed a genre and influenced countless others, and players continue to enjoy it today, nearly 30 years later. It has an active and
100%.
passionate speedrunning community that's dug deep into its code to unrandomize its random nature to reach new records of completion, as well as casual players just feeling nostalgic and loading it up every now and then to appreciate the series' beginnings. The market left on the video game industry and its individual players continues to resonate to this day, and that's why Diablo, released in 1996, was great.
I will say, whether you like old classic looking games or not, the graphics, how they play or not, anyone who enjoys ARPGs should try Diablo 1 just purely to understand the feel of what it feels like when things matter in your game. Like, that everything is down to how you play it and how you strategize and the items that you choose to use, decide to use. Everybody just needs to play it at least one time just to get it, bro. Just get it.
Thanks for watching my video. This series is a big passion project of mine, and I hope that came through. I love the Diablo series, and I'll definitely be covering Diablo 2 at some point, as well as a bunch of other games. And if you enjoyed this one, check the description for a playlist that includes all episodes of the series. And if you really enjoyed it, I did also play through the entire game with commentary and kind of edited it in the style of my OSR series. So if you enjoyed that, you might enjoy this as well. And that's available for channel members if you want a more casual look at what the game is. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Why It Was.
Thanks, Matt Season. Brilliant video. Brilliant video. I enjoy his videos. He knows exactly what he's talking about it from a point of view of somebody who cares, bro. Somebody who cares, and whether he's talking about World of Warcraft, whether he's talking about Diablo, you get the sense that he cares about the game that he plays, and he is either upset or happy about it. And it's just like, it gets to the point where it's like, this is what I'm telling you guys, these games are good, why is everybody ruining them? You know what I mean? But no, 100% brilliant video. I'll link you guys the video there if you want to give it a like. Subscribe to Matt Season's incredible video. He's a great storytelling voice, and he always puts the work in. Like, the video's brilliant. Couldn't agree more. Diablo is, and I will repeat myself, Diablo, if they just reimagine the graphics, up them a little bit, don't change anything, don't touch anything, don't change anything, just up the graphics, and you have a masterpiece on your hands. An absolute masterpiece on your hands. Like, yeah, GG's.